Welcome to the East Bay Regional Park District's Board Executive Committee meeting of May 3rd. We're beginning today at 3:04. Welcome, everyone. And Monique, would you take a roll call, please?
Sure. This is Monique Salas, Recording Secretary, taking roll. President Waspy.
Here.
Director Coffey.
Here.
Director Eccles.
Present.
Park District staff participating in this meeting include General Manager Sabrina Landreth, DGM Ana Alvarez, General Counsel Lynn Borgout, the Deputy General Manager Jim O'Connor. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act. We are providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so: 1, live via Zoom, 2, by submitting an email, or 3, leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we will begin.
All right, thank you, Monique. So our one and only item today on the agenda is the electric bicycle policy update. Mr. O'Connor.
Okay, good afternoon. Jim O'Connor, Deputy General Manager. Glad to be here today. And we're back talking to you again. If you might recall, committee members, I can't recall how many of you were on the executive committee last year, but we were here in the fall. We went to both the PAC, the Park Advisory Committee, and the executive committee this past fall, seeking input on the potential to change or update our policy in relation to e-bikes. Both at the Park Advisory Committee meeting and the executive committee, we got excellent feedback from both the committee members of the public. We went back and did some research on the comments that had come up, and we've done that research, and we're back again to discuss with you a potential change in the district's policy related to e-bike use on district trails. This is about. There we go. Okay. So I'm here with, also working with me is Sean Dugan, our Trails Program Manager. And I want to thank Sean for filling in for me at the Park Advisory Committee meeting. I was unable to make it. Sean did a great job filling in there and working with the committee members. Let's see. So we're gonna talk a little bit about current policy, district policy in relation to bicycle use and e-bikes specifically. We're going to talk a little bit about other agencies and the research that we've done in regards to certain issues, specific issues around e-bike use. And then, well, let's start there. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. Now, why isn't it working? There it goes. Okay. So really quickly, I want to start off with, okay. There we go. So let's start off. This is, of course, our district mission statement, our public mission statement. And like all regional park agencies, we have a dual mission. One is recreational access for the enjoyment of the public who visit our parks. And the other one is resource protection. And balancing those two things is a challenge. And we address these issues every day out in parks. So I wanted to start there because we are a regional park system and we do provide recreational access. Another underlying assumption in this conversation today is that recreational bike use is a legitimate use in Park District properties on designated trails. So we've got to start there because there seems to be a lot of general pushback on the aspect of bicycle recreation, but it is a legal and legitimate use of district trails and has been so for many, many years. What we did, one of the first things we did is went back and looked at the Park District Master Plan, because the Master Plan takes our public missions and sets priorities of our activities that we do here at the Park District and sets the tone and vision for the work that we do. So I went through and I pulled out a few sections from the master plan I think are relevant to the discussion. This is on page 18 under the vision section. So improve access to and use of parks by members of groups that are underrepresented, such as persons with disabilities, the economically disadvantaged, and elderly park visitors. And that's relevant to today's conversation. Next one is under the responding to changing demographics. Our population is getting older. The baby boomers are reaching retirement age. By 2020, California's senior population will be nearly twice what it was in the year 2000. In the next decade, seniors will have more leisure time and will continue to strive for an active lifestyle as they retire. Provision of safe and easy access to the outdoors will also be required as they continue to age. They will also want to continue to participate actively in social causes, including conservation. On page 28, also under responding to changes in demographics, an increasing number of park users are equipped with high-tech outdoor gear and will look for adventure-oriented activities such as mountain biking, kayaking, geocaching. And while the regional park systems is always focused on passive outdoor recreation, the definition of those activities may be changing. And I highlighted that last statement because it was like the authors of this document were prescient. They knew that we were going to be having this conversation at some point based on changes in technology. And here we are having that very same conversation. What laws have led to e-bikes, more and more adoption of e-bikes? Well, one was in 2015, AB 1096, signed by then Governor Jerry Brown, that reclassified electric bikes from being motor vehicles to actually electric bicycles. And it created three classes, which I'll review really quickly with everybody. But all of those three classes are limited to motor power of 750 watts, and that's about 1 horsepower. And so like a 250cc internal combustion engine motorcycle is about 30 horsepower. So this is 1/30 of that, so 1 horsepower. And specifically that law, when it was converted into motor vehicle code, it allowed for class 1 and 2 bikes to be allowed on bicycle paths, bikeways, and bicycle lanes and trails unless restricted by the local jurisdiction. And it prohibited class 3 bikes on those very same pathways unless the local jurisdiction allowed for it. And I highlighted this last statement because more recent legislation in 2022, AB 1909, has actually reversed that now and allows for class 3 e-bikes to be used on bicycle paths, bikeways, and bicycle lanes unless specifically prohibited by the local jurisdiction. So again, it's in favor of active transportation and promoting the use of e-bikes for that purpose. So this is the 3 classes under the motor vehicle code. Class 1 is a pedal assist bike, meaning it does not have a throttle. The motor, of course, is 750 watts, and it's limited. The motor is active up to 20 miles an hour. After 20 miles an hour, the motor cuts off, and then it's just the person who's pedaling the bike. So that's a class 1 e-bike. A class 2 e-bike can have pedals and a throttle, a hand-activated throttle. It also is limited to 20 miles an hour in terms of motor assistance. Some of them have pedals and throttle, and some have a throttle with no pedals. Class 3 e-bikes are pedal assist again, no throttle, and they have motor assistance up to 28 miles an hour. So those are the 3 classes of e-bikes under the motor vehicle code. And just for reference, they also address mopeds. Mopeds can have a motor power up to horsepower up to 4 horsepower and can go as fast as 30 miles an hour. But those are not considered bicycles; those are still considered mopeds. In response to this, the Park District had many inquiries from the public about the use of e-bikes, specifically around active transportation. In 2017, 2018, Park District staff conducted a pilot project on our paved regional trails to find out really what was going on and if there were any issues. Based on the data that we collected at that point, we brought to the board an update to Ordinance 38 that would allow the use of Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes on 8 of our paved regional trails, and that was approved by the board in 2019 and has been active since then. So at this point, the Park District does allow Class 1 and Class 2, but only on our paved regional trails, and the e-bikes are still prohibited on unpaved trails. So what's happening in the world of bicycles and e-bikes? Generally, the data that we found is that mountain biking specifically has exploded since in the last 3 years since the pandemic. And when we look at e-bikes specifically, if you look at the data here, there were 880,000 e-bikes purchased in the United States in 2021. And that's double that were sold in 2020 and almost 3.5 times the number of e-bikes that were sold in 2019. Class 1 e-bikes are by far the largest of this market, about 45% of total e-bikes sold. The one interesting point I want to make here in terms of e-mountain bikes or EMTBs is that most manufacturers that are producing EMTB bikes are producing Class 1 bikes. They see no purpose for Class 2 or Class 3 bikes, not that those aren't being produced, but the vast majority of manufacturers are focused on Class 1 e-bikes as those are adequate for the purpose that most people use them. Globally, the e-bike industry is also expanding significantly. You can see up there between 2023 and 2028, there's an expected 8.4% increase in sales and in gross revenue of e-bike sales. And it's going to become a $77 billion business worldwide. Most of that is in Asia, specifically in China. The cost of e-bikes is dropping significantly now. You can get a decent e-bike for less than $1,000 now. And the vast majority of those consumers are people that are aging up, like me. One of the areas that has come up around e-bikes is the perception of e-bikes. And one of the reference studies that we looked at was Jefferson County, Colorado. And they did a really interesting survey. What they did is they had one of their regional parks, their county parks, that had a large lake with a trail around it. So what they did is they set up an easy up along the lake shore there, adjacent to the trail. And they sent out, I think it was 6 riders on e-bikes. They called them ghost riders. And they had them continuously circle on the lake trail around. And then they started doing intercept surveys with people that were walking around the lake. And one of the questions was, are you able to identify an e-bike? Did you see one today? And you can see that the vast majority of them said no. 65% of them said no, even though they had been passed several times by these ghost riders going around and around. So the vast majority of people were not able to recognize an e-bike. And then what they did, I think this was really interesting, is they also had bikes available for demonstration. So they did an intercept survey. People did a survey with somebody and then asked them, hey, would you like to go try one? So they allowed them to get on the e-bike. They went around the lake, came back, and they did another survey with them. And they asked them if their perception of e-bikes had changed. And you can see that 65% of those indeed did change their perception about e-bikes. And I put a little graphic up there. The one on the left, that monster on the left is what a lot of people think of as e-bikes. That has an 8,000 watt motor. That's about 10 horsepower. It can go 62 miles an hour. It has a throttle. And even though it has pedals, that's way outside any of the classifications at the federal or state level. But that's what people have in mind sometimes when they think about e-bikes. The reality is the bike on the right side, that's a Class 1 e-mountain bike. It's limited to 750 watts. That's 1 horsepower. And it goes up, the motor assists up to 20 miles an hour, and it does not have a throttle. So this was an interesting study that they did, really testing out both people's perception of e-bikes, that they understood what one was, what its limitations were. So I really enjoyed reading that study from Jefferson County. And by the way, they do allow e-bikes on their trails. In fact, they have one park where they do odd even, like we're doing at Briones in the pilot, where on the odd days, only bikes are allowed on one trail in Apex Park. And on the opposite day, it's horses and equestrians. So they're a very interesting agency in terms of how they're managing bike use. So e-bike safety, based on the literature review that we've read to date, No data concludes that e-bikes are more or less safe than conventional bikes. And this has been a big focus of many of the comments we've heard. And so we've gathered just a couple of the statements out of the research that we've done from different specific studies, scientific studies, and agency data that we've gathered. So speed uphill climbing is slightly faster, but downhill speed is based on gravity. And you've heard me say that before. And that's true for both conventional bikes and e-bikes. Speed large is determined by the condition of the rider, or the rider's skill, and the design of the trail. Across all studies reviewed, Class 1 e-bikes travel about 3 kilometers an hour, about 1.8 miles an hour faster than conventional bikes overall. Class 3 bikes travel about double the average running speed, which is the speed on flat ground. Reckless behavior is associated with individuals, not whole classes or user groups, is a statement out of the Tahoe National Forest study. E-bike riders behave in the same way as conventional bike riders, with similar violation rates in terms of speed and behavior on. And most of this data, one thing you have to recognize is most of this data has to do with urban bike use on paved roadways. That's most of the studies are done. Very few studies have been done in terms of on dirt trails in parks. Continuing on here, user safety. Off-trail bicycle use is already a higher risk recreational activity in relation to the potential for injury of the participant. So now we're looking at the safety aspect in terms of injuries. E-bikes, the injury rate is about 1.4 injuries per 1,000 e-bike riders. For conventional bikes, that's 10 injuries per 1,000 for conventional bikes. Again, this is an urban type data study. E-bike crash rates and severity compared to conventional bikes when the number of trips and distance traveled is taken into consideration. Remember, e-bikes often are used more often and often travel further distances because it's easier to ride them. Most groups of e-bike riders were not more likely than conventional bike users to be involved in a crash, for which treatment at an EVAR is needed, or to sustain severe injuries if they're involved in a crash. So they're similar to conventional bikes. Injuries mostly attributed to conflicts with vehicles, and EVs tending to be older riders or poorer health than conventional bike riders, and may result in greater tendency towards balance and coordination problems. A lot of injuries are simply falling, not keeping your balance while you're riding, and which increases the likelihood of crashes. So a lot of it has to do with age and fitness. So those data points came from one, a 2019 study of safety, and the other one was a specific study on safety and health related issues. I thought I'd pull this one off. This is the policy statement off the National Park Service website. I would say from my own personal experience, the National Park Service is probably the least bike-friendly agency that you can come across. This is their e-bike policy. They say that e-bikes enhance fun and healthy recreational opportunities for visitors to national parks and supports active transportation options. E-bikes make bicycle travel easier and more efficient because they allow bicycles to travel further and with less effort. E-bikes provide expanded options for visitors wish to ride a bicycle, but may be limited because of physical fitness, age, disability, or convenience. And of course, they also provide an alternate to gasoline or diesel-powered modes of transportation. So that's the National Park Service's general policy on e-bikes. And then specifically, each superintendent evaluates the use of e-bikes at their specific parks. What's happening locally? So we've shared this with you before. These are our local Bay Area agencies. Santa Clara County for the last 3 years has allowed Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes anywhere conventional bikes are allowed in their system. So any trails that are designated for bike use. Mid-Peninsula allows them only at 2 of their specific preserves. These are more urban preserves with paved trails. That's Ravenswood and Rancho San Antonio. Marin County allows Class 1 and 2 on paved bicycle trails and roads, only less allowed, specifically signed for off-trail use. Municipal Water District does not allow e-bikes except on public roads where other vehicles are allowed. Walnut Creek allows Class 1 and 2 anywhere conventional bikes are allowed. Sonoma County is the same for Class 1 bikes. Solano County allows Class 1 bikes anywhere conventional bikes are allowed. California State Parks, it's by superintendent decision order. I pointed out Mount Diablo allows class 1 e-bikes anywhere that other bikes, conventional bikes, are allowed. Golden Gate National Recreation Area also allows class 1 and 2 anywhere conventional bikes are allowed in their park system. One thing I wanted to point out, I think you know that I worked for Santa Clara County Parks for 20 years. I still have connections with county parks down there. I had a chance to talk to both their director and their chief park ranger, Flint Glines. And I asked them specifically, so after 3 years, do you see any patterns of difference between conventional bikes and e-bikes? And because they were asked the very same question by Mid-Peninsula when they did their studies in 2021, he said, no, Jim, in terms of accidents, much less. Fewer numbers of e-bikes are involved in their total accident count, also in their enforcement in terms of violations, very few e-bikes involved in their numbers of citations. So they're not seeing any patterns that are specifically related to e-bike use in their trail system. So I'm going to pass it off to Sean, since he filled in for me at the PAC, and let him talk about what happened at the PAC meeting on the 24th.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. Sean Dugan, Trails Program Manager. We tried to distill a 2.5-hour PAC meeting into one slide, so I'll try not to put words in people's mouths here. But in general, I want to commend Chair Obringer for facilitating a discussion with that many people that was that productive. It was impressive. And so for the most part, there was no opposition to the way the proposal is written. And in fact, at one point, I thought the committee would actually recommend in favor of this, but it was not unanimous, and that recommendation was not made. But the benefits of this policy from an equitable access perspective, physical benefits to the community, were recognized. The discussion revolved around other classes of e-bikes and why are we not including those in the proposal? Again, but not a unanimous position on that was provided. There were questions about equity and the cost of e-bikes, and even though that they are coming down in cost, they're still around $1,000. And we've since been given a list of the programs in Alameda and Contra Costa County, which you've been provided on the 11 by 17 piece of paper in front of you, are all the incentive programs and rebate programs that MTC is actually supporting through transportation dollars. Those efforts are out there. There was a concern about fire danger brought up as these have batteries and motors. And of course, we heard about environmental impacts, increasing the popularity of bikes, et cetera, through a proposal. And we did try to bring back the discussion to the fact that e-bikes are in our parks today, and that we do not anticipate increasing bike use as a result of this policy, that this policy is addressing the increasing bike use in our parks. There was, again, the environmental concerns, people getting into the wilderness further, and potential noise impacts from a study that was done by Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. We'll talk about that a little in a moment. And the enforcement challenges around the challenge of determining between a conventional bike and a Class 1 e-bike. What about the challenge determining whether it's a Class 1 bike or Class 2 bike or Class 3 bike? And we brought that back. Of course, our public safety personnel, Lieutenant Kocher, reminded the committee of the behavior over batteries approach that we take, and that behavior is really individualistic and is not necessarily dictated by the type of device you're using. If you're going to follow the rules, you're going to follow the rules. And then more data. There was a discussion around more data, and it really kind of resolved to that if we did adopt this policy, that we should at least have a review period where we can report back on anything we learn. And in general, there was no recommendation made as it wasn't agendized that way. And I thought it was a great discussion, and I think general support around the Class 1 e-bikes on district unpaved trails where conventional bikes are allowed.
All right, thanks again, Sean. I just want to address some of these concerns that came up through the PAC. One, cost. I want again, we did give you a listing. These are local programs funded by MTC in terms of supporting people. A lot of times, a lower income or income need is the terminology they use. There's quite a deal of funding available for people who have economic challenges in terms of purchasing e-bikes. So I don't think that's an issue. When it comes to fire danger, when you look at most of the studies or even the news articles that come up, most of that fire issues are around charging of batteries. And so we're not going to be doing charging out here. It's not during use of these bikes out on the trails. It's when people use a non-UL certified charger or a non-UL battery. That's where the problems have occurred, where they use some sort of aftermarket charger or an aftermarket battery. So I don't see that as an issue for e-bike use in our parks. I do want to talk a little bit about the Mid-Penn, the BAT study done by H.T. Harvey. I just want to read this to you. This is the specific example they used that is the basis for their recommendation of buffers between trails and potential bat roosting sites. So on the other hand, bats are particularly sensitive to noise and proximity to maternity colonies. At a daytime construction site in a large urban park, a maternity colony of big brown bats tolerated high decibel levels of low frequency sounds that are audible to humans, generated by chainsaws and large graders within 100 feet of their maternity roost. But the colony abandoned their roost when workers used a high frequency laser surveying instrument inaudible to the human ear. So this is the one example they're using from one study. I was unable to find that study. This is from the second annual Bat Echolocation Symposium. But one thing I want to point out about this study is that they're using one reference example. If you've ever been on a construction site, this type of laser equipment that's used, what they do is they set up this device on a reference point, they turn it on, and it's basically on for hours. Because as they're doing grading, they're doing elevation readings off of this laser device, or when they're doing foundation work on a building, they'll use this laser device for hours. So one thing you have in this situation is you have a static source of the noise, and it's continuous for a long period of time. That's unlike a mountain bike that's traveling on a trail. A mountain bike on a trail may come by a bat roost for a very short period of time, and then it's gone. It's transitory. It's short-lived and it's transitory. The other thing that's important to note that was in the study is that mountain bikes, e-mountain bikes generate noise when they're going uphill primarily. That's where the greatest sound pressure in decibels was measured in the study, was when they were traveling uphill. So the situation you have to have is an uphill trail next to a roost site. It's a very short period of time interference. That was not addressed. I read through this study 5 times just to make sure I had this correct. And never once was this issue of transitory nature of this sound source in terms of e-bikes was not mentioned in the study, which I thought was really glaring that was left out, that conversation around that. So that's all I'll say about that at this point. It's one study in terms of e-mountain bike use in relation to bats and certain species of bats based on frequency generated by the e-bike motor. Another comment that's come up several times in both our public meeting sessions and other public meetings for other agencies is this concept of trail capacity. And the statement goes like this, that allowing e-bikes might increase the number of bikes on trails and allow bikes to travel deeper into a park's trail system. This is a common comment that's received when bikes agencies are looking at e-bikes use. And I have to tell you, I've thought a lot about this, and I thought there's 3 underlying assumptions in that statement. So the first one is that we're reaching some level of trail capacity, and that that capacity was beyond what was anticipated when parks were first opened to use. The second assumption is that e-bikes specifically and uniquely are going to push us past that imagined capacity limit on trails. And the third one, which I think is kind of the most disturbing to me, is that people who have mobility issues, whether it's due to age or fitness or some sort of physical disability, that they don't have the same rights to participate in this recreational activity as able-bodied people. So I have a real problem with a statement like that is, I've not heard anybody say we're reaching some capacity limit. And if we were reaching capacity limit, why would we just focus on e-bikes? Why wouldn't we look at trail usage overall, not specifically e-bikes? And I'm not sure that at this point, e-bikes are a large number of users on our trails, and I don't think that they're pushing us over some imagined trail capacity limit. So those are just my thoughts, my personal thoughts, and thinking about this over a long period of time and seeing these comments and our agency comments and other agency comments. But I think the issue comes down to, if we go back just for a minute here. So these agencies, when you look at their, several of them, like the Forest Service, I looked at some of their documents, the National Park Service documents. When they made decisions around e-bike use in the affirmative, and meaning allowing Class 1 and Class 2 bikes, that was made on two grounds. One is that they didn't determine that e-bikes had any greater impacts than conventional bikes, which they had currently allowed. And two, the benefits of allowing the use of these e-bikes in terms of people with mobility challenges outweighed any concerns they had about potential impacts. So that was their thinking when you read through some of these documents, that they thought the benefit outweighed the impacts, and the impacts that they saw weren't any different than conventional bikes that were currently being used on their trail systems. Okay. And so what are our takeaways from listening to your comments, the public comments, going out and doing our, looking at the research, looking at the agency studies? So what are our takeaways here? Current district policy and regulations allow bike access. Biking is a legitimate recreational activity on our trails. Many public agencies that manage public recreational trail systems have adopted policies allowing Class 1 bikes anywhere conventional bikes are currently allowed. Currently available scientific research does not support the notion that the environmental or safety impacts of e-bikes differ from conventional bikes, except for this potential issue of noise. Management of e-bikes would be similar to conventional bikes in terms of trail design and how we manage them day-to-day use, including enforcement. E-bike usage has become common in district parks, forcing enforcement restrictions to focus on behavior over batteries, if you've heard us say that before. E-bikes facilitate equitable trail access for older people and others with mobility challenges. Those are the basic takeaways we've done from the research that we've done. So with that said, this is our staff recommendation we'd like the committee to consider. We believe that we should amend Ordinance 38 to allow Class 1 e-bikes on all district trails that currently allow the use of conventional bikes, and to continue to allow the use of Class 2 e-bikes on the 8 paved regional trails currently allow their use under Ordinance 38. So, and also I just want to point out in the PowerPoint hard copy, we have given you the bibliography of our research, just so you have that if you want to look at that sometime. Okay, with that, Sean and I've got Lieutenant Kotcher is here. We've got several staff here to answer any questions you may have on the topic.
Any questions or comments from board members?
You want to go?
Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, I'll take the challenge. But why don't I go for a little while and then back to you guys. I had the real benefit of listening to the PAC meeting last night. I told my wife I was going to go away for about an hour and I'll be back and listen to this with my headphones on so you won't be bothered. And 2.5 hours later, taking many notes, I came back to it, and Dennis was our rep for that meeting. So he attended and can share his thoughts. My conclusion was a little more in terms of a suggestion from that group that you came away with. I perceived that it was unanimous. I guess that's the wrong word, but there was one person who was hesitant about recommending that the Park District allow Class 1 e-bikes. I thought the group at the end, listening to all of them, especially the second round of discussion among the PAC members, after hearing public comment and reading of email and such, that there was just one person reluctant to give any recommendation, and it was unclear what where she was coming from on it. To me, the debate among the PAC members that evening focused on whether they should urge the district board to adopt a policy allowing both Class 1 and Class 2. I believe a majority of the group wanted the recommendation to be accepting both 1 and 2 classifications. So that group was rather cohesive together, and I think that was a consensus. Where a debate on recommendation evolved was because, as with us, that group is very much attuned to the Brown Act. And they were council will really appreciate the fact that they were very focused on what was on their agenda, and it was informational. And so a group of them just said, it wouldn't be right to make an outright recommendation. So my takeaway from the PAC meeting was there was a willingness to recommend at least Class 1, likely Class 2, if you took a vote, but a reluctance to do a formal recommendation. And Carlin tried to get an informal consensus and show of hands, and there was a little debate over that. So that's where they came around. The point, though, for consideration and why that was a valuable couple of hours was just the takeaways from the discussion and the public input that came about there. So that's my takeaway from the PAC, and it was very useful. And of course, so was Sean's presentation and the lieutenant's presentation, and both of their responses to questions from PAC members. I'm also was informed a lot by the board's recent trip to the California Trails and Greenway Conference. They had a panel of e-bike experts, people who were from all over the state in park operators, trail operators allowing e-bikes in their operations. And so we got some really good feedback. And that takeaway is it's largely consistent with the recommendations and findings and the presentation you and Sean have been presenting today and at the PAC and at our past meetings. The one note I would bring back, actually a couple of notes I really found very informative, and that was the panel concluded that within 5 years, the majority of bicycles sold in this country are going to be e-bikes. They suggested, without knowing the actual percentages. Oh, and there was bicycle sales manufacturers there on the panel as well. So they were giving these figures. In California, it's going to be a much higher percentage. So in fact, within 5 years, the majority of bicycles in use are going to be e-bikes. My own observations from spending a couple of weekends now since the implementation of the Briones pilot project, I purposely gone on bike days at the Alhambra staging area. A majority of the bikes going into the park on both of the days I was there are e-bikes. I didn't count very carefully because the volumes were really hot, very popular days at the Alhambra staging area. Clearly a majority of them, more than 50%, as I was counting, were e-bikes. And I don't know from there what the percentages were. Just it's mostly e-bikes. And the ridership was all over the demographics. It's hard to kind of pinpoint the demographics, although significant portion of the e-bikes were used by folks my age. Was my own personal observation. The panel at the Parks and Greenway Conference also suggested that, consistent with what you are reporting, that the environmental impacts on habitat so far have focused only on bat populations as being impacted. Potentially, they're not, as you said, not exactly sure how the bat populations are impacted. They did suggest that every new year sees the bicycles, the e-bikes being less noisy, of that high-pitched hum that we're all fairly familiar with. It's gradually going away, as is the size. This is why it's so difficult, unless you really stop and look at the bike, to tell it's an e-bike, because what they describe as the down tube of the bike that houses the batteries are getting smaller and smaller. And I noticed that at Brioni's. It's a whole enforcement, trying to enforce a ban is a topic all in of itself. So I won't go in that direction. So my takeaways from the PAC, Brioni's, the email, both to the PAC, the public input from the PAC, and the public input for this meeting. We had approximately 50 emails, and all of them are in favor of permitting e-bike use at our parks, with the exception 2 or 3, maybe. My count. I think that's fairly accurate. But what was most impressive at all about the email that we've been receiving is it's all custom. These emails that we're getting, if you notice, they're individually written. So whoever has been suggesting that we get these emails, they're also suggesting use your own language and use your own experiences. And it's a distinctly significant percentage of these emails, these public input emails, are older people who are saying that, they have been able to return to bicycling despite age-related mobility issues because of e-bikes. So that is before us, the feedback we've gotten for this meeting. I think the last note, and then I'll shift to my colleagues, is that on the list of agencies that you have surveyed, there's one agency that I think we can list that's missing, and it's East Bay Regional Park District. I say with a smile, and maybe some folks want to criticize it, but we are in fact experiencing e-bike usage. And we are experiencing the allowance, at least of Class 1. And frankly, it's one of the issues I want to address with you folks maybe at some point. But when I'm out there, I have trouble distinguishing Class 1 and Class 2. I think they actually have to stop near me, and I got to look at see if there's a throttle. I think that's how you distinguish the Class 1 and Class 2. But I believe we have, and we're experiencing this clearly with the Brioni's pilot project. There are e-bikes, and we can list ourselves as an agency allowing e-bikes because they are now the majority out at Brioni's. So we're living in a living study of how e-bikes mix with conventional bikes within the context of our new trail management policies out at Brioni's that are being tested. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's a fascinating part of the of that test. And I know I've been asking people out there, is there a distinction among the bicycle population that you encounter between e-bikes and other bikes? And I'm getting basically no observations of any impact that are distinct with e-bikes as opposed to conventional bikes. And then I have all sorts of personal observations from being out there and watching these bikes. But I'll skip that for now. And
Director Croft, you might recall you and I went for a walk out there at Brioni's a year ago. And during our walk, 7 mountain bikes passed us, and 5 of the 7 were e-bikes. And I kept pointing them out to you. I was like, that's an e-bike. Yeah. The majority of the bikes are getting to be e-bikes.
Yeah, and so it really does reflect on the PAC conversation, I think, to observe that they're already there, and to suggest that we can somehow step back in time and recalibrate to prohibit these bikes is not a useful exercise to go through. And the idea that these bikes will be most of the bikes that are out there using the parks, regardless of what we do in 5 years, unless you want to bring armed forces out there as an enforcement mechanism. That again, as I said, that's a whole nother issue. But I do think we can be on this list because I know I listened to the lieutenant describe the police officers of this park district and their experiences with the impacts of e-bikes. So we might call on the lieutenant at some point because that was useful for the PAC members, I know. And that was really good feedback that we got on the lieutenant's conversation, but I'll turn it back to Dennis.
All right, thank you. I guess we'll hear from Elizabeth later, but yeah, so I agree. I've been to a number of meetings on this, including the PAC meeting. I think everything that's been said is true. They're here. I think we need to accommodate them. I think there's a way we need to accommodate them. I know personally, for me, I have some trepidation adding another series or another type or use in the park district, but in the capacity limits, that was one of my questions. But we've got 1,300 miles of trails. I find I hike every day in the parks. I find that the bottleneck is a mile out and in, from a staging area, a mile out, you're going to have congestion. And I think we need enforcement in those areas. And that's why I think it's manageable because it's only the first mile. Everything else, it's clear. You can go anywhere you want in the park district for 13 or for 1,200 miles, and you won't have any of these problems that we see or perceive. So the capacity issue, I think, can be handled by definition. Electronic assisted bikes will get you further out into the park district and sort of dissipate the groups or the crowding.
Director Wasp, just a comment on that. We went, several months ago, we went down to Santa Clara County and actually met with staff, including Donna Rocha, their director. And we went for a walk out on a fairly new trail system they opened in Calero Park. And that's exactly what their observations have been and the feedback they're getting from both equestrians, who were the traditional users of that park, and now the mountain bike riders, is that the equestrians' comments were that once you got out in a certain distance, people were spread out far enough that there wasn't conflict and there was plenty of room out there once you got past the staging area congestion. So that's been observed by others also.
Right. And then secondly, I was concerned with the environmental impacts, and it doesn't seem like there will be any more than anybody else, and including, there are environmental impacts, but that's based on we live next to a metropolis. We're going to have lots and lots of people. They're going to have lots of interest. I don't perceive environmental impacts as being an issue here, although the only environmental impact I see is more cyclists who, and once again, we don't want to lump things together, but the mountain bikers there's a definite, they are making bandit trails and these whatever you want to call them, casual trails, bandit trails, whatever, bootleg trails. But I think that's the biggest threat. And so I am in favor of this program, but I really, really, really think we need to define the level of enforcement we're going to do. Yeah. And I mean, at some point, we always talk about, well, other agencies are saying we don't have any accidents. I'd really like to know, and we have to do this. I know we do this internally. I'd just like to know, because critics are going to go, oh, some crazed e-biker who obviously will have diminished skills, as we keep saying. That's what we're letting come to the parks, and we want to facilitate that. But with their limited skills and their extra speed, they're going to crush hikers or equestrians or whomever. I'd really like to see some factual information being taken. I mean, and also I'd like to see if we're writing tickets and what we're writing them for, because I don't want to go out there and have somebody with a time clock saying, oh, you're speeding. But if there are groups of people that are taking advantage of the ability to go fast on these bikes, to monitor that and see what we're doing in that area. Because I don't think you can have a you can't have a program without enforcement. I mean, I know we don't want to do that and nobody wants to talk about it, but it's very important. And no, and especially, and it's been brought up, we need to have periodic review. And I think that's very important with statistics, because we compiled a bunch of great statistics from other organizations, and I think we should be in the forefront of this whole deal.
Director Wasby, all very good comments. And as you know from our conversation last spring at the board study session on trails, we certainly highlight that there is a lot of areas that we have to step into now as trail usage has increased significantly. Enforcement is one of them, monitoring for bootleg trail and restoration of bootleg trails. All of those areas are areas that we have to step up in this new era when trail usage has just exploded after the pandemic. We're going to address that, as we stated at the study session. The staff we're conducting a strategic planning effort around trail specifically. Enforcement, maintenance, management, all of those areas are going to be looked at with some specific suggestions that we're going to bring back to the board at their next study session coming in the fall on trails. So I think all of those areas are going to be looked at, and you're exactly right. Enforcement has to be stepped up, especially around this issue of illegal bootleg trail development. It's really an issue in parks, but it's not specific to e-bikes. It's a general issue that we see in parks.
Right. Well, thank you. And in closing, I want to use one of your quotes because I like it a lot. I did throughout this whole issue and looking at it from a number of ways, I think the impact is, in my opinion, far outweighed by the benefits of having more people come to the parks, enjoy the parks, and use our parks. So that's how I will be voting. Director Eccles?
Yes, thank you. And I apologize, I had to step up for just a second. My daughter's school had called twice, so that's a concern. But anyway, I'm going to take this off. So I did have a few questions on the slides. So one thing that piqued my interest is that under the e-bike safety, it showed that there was 1.4 injuries per 1,000 e-bikes versus 10 injuries per 1,000 conventional bikes. So did the studies have any hypothesis about that? Why that would be? Because you would think if older folks with worse balance and whatever are using the e-bikes, that you wouldn't have that much fewer injuries on the e-bikes.
Very astute observation. And obviously that's due to the imbalance in numbers of total conventional bikes versus e-bikes.
But it says per 1,000.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's a good observation though, but they're just talking about the likelihood of accidents based on what they see. The one study was looking at, it actually went into the hospital emergency room. We're looking at the patients that were entering their hospital emergency room that were bicycle related injuries, and they were evaluating that. So that's a good observation though, but maybe that would change over time.
Yeah, or it could be, it might have something to do with it being in the city versus out in the open, or who knows. But that just struck me as interesting, since people are concerned about the e-bike injuries.
One of the interesting comments was that drivers now, they are not used to e-bikes. E-bikes travel at a higher rate of speed than a conventional bike, and people don't perceive it. So they see the bike, they don't realize the speed of the e-bike in an urban environment. And was one of the hypotheses of why you're seeing e-bikes having negative interactions in traffic versus not necessarily injuries and going to the ER, but their drivers have to get used to seeing e-bikes out there traveling on the roadways. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And then I also had a question, well, first of all, related to class 1 versus class 2. I think it makes sense. And you and I already talked about this to if we are going in this direction, to take a small step and see how that goes. But it did occur to me, because one of the reasons why we would want to allow e-bikes on these trails is because so that you can have more access for older people or disabled people or people with mobility issues. But allowing only the class 1, does that make it harder for people with certain mobility issues? Because I'm just wondering if there's some folks with mobility issues who really can't use their legs to pedal, but could use the class 2 bike where you have the throttle and you don't have to you don't have to get the motor going by pedaling. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not suggesting we, change the recommendation, but that was just something I was curious that we might want to think about.
So that was a point that was made also by the Park Advisory Committee members, saying that, well, if somebody has a lower leg mobility issue, that the throttle would allow them to, enjoy bicycle recreation right out there without having to use pedals, or if they have a diminished ability to use pedals. So, staff, we're not opposed class 2, including class 2 bikes in the recommendation. We were just thinking that we could take it stepwise, start with class 1. One of the issues that we are addressing, and specifically through the Briones pilot project, is the collecting of data. We really need a better data collection system so we can find out what's really going on out there. So we suggested this as a stepwise approach where we try class 1, see how things go, and then we could consider class 2. But we're not opposed if the committee or the board was to consider that suggestion as part of the recommendation. We're not opposed to that. We just thought it would be a stepwise approach might be a better way to go initially.
Okay. And I also was interested in the study about the bats, because it seems like they are mostly sensitive to the very high frequency ranges that we can't even hear. So do we know this? I mean, the buzzing sound that the e-bikes make, is it in that highest frequency or the higher frequency, or?
Yeah, one of
not?
One of the benefits I'd say of the HT Harvey study that was conducted for Mid-Penn is that they did do some good data collection. They had set microphones out at certain distances away from the trail, and then had conventional bikes come by, different types of e-bikes come by, and they measured the sound pressure in decibels and the attenuation of that with distance. So they did measure that, and they did measure it at different frequencies. And so e-bikes were measuring in the 20 megahertz to 40 megahertz, which is beyond human hearing. And so the e-bikes were generating those noises as per their measurements. So there was some good data collected by that study, I think, in terms of noise generation and the frequencies, specific frequencies. I just think we need to look a little broader at that. And there probably needs to be additional studies on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I know certainly one concern about having the e-bikes is that folks can go, or more folks can go further out into the more remote areas of the park. And to me, that resonates with me. So I was just wondering whether there in the various studies that you've looked at, did people look at that, like where people are actually going on the e-bikes, and are they traveling further? And
The really biggest challenge with the e-bikes is that most of the data you see, the studies you find, are urban studies, because most of the focus on e-bikes is about active transportation. So nearly all the studies you find are looking at urban environments and bikes being used for commute purposes or recreation in urban sites. So I haven't found a study that really examines, in terms of trail usage, distances, things like that. I did not find a study like that. That's just been a concern that people have expressed in different forums, whether it's our public meetings or other public agency forums.
Okay. Well, I think, certainly on balance, and it always is a balancing act. So for me, the benefits of people being able to use bikes in the park, and older people and people with mobility issues, and others who are bike enthusiasts, but for whatever reason might prefer the e-bike over the traditional mountain bike. I do think that it makes sense to allow these bikes on trails that the bicycles use. But I do also feel that we absolutely, as my colleagues have said, that we really have to look at the enforcement and somehow step up the enforcement, and particularly if we are going to be getting more and more bikes to especially the bootleg trails, because it just destroys so much habitat, and it's anyway, so that we have to really come down on. But then also other things too, just in terms of people going too fast and people using the trails they're not supposed to be using and all of that. I know, as I've said before, that I think most of the people out there are good actors, and a lot of the leadership in these groups are also good actors and are trying to set a good example. But we do have to make sure that we are on top of the enforcement so that we can make sure that people realize that bad behavior is not going to be tolerated.
I agree with that. And I think we all agree with that.
Sure, go right ahead.
I asked for permission to go again because you folks triggered a couple of thoughts. I think I'd like to get a response, Jim, after, as usual, I ramble on a little to get to the question. But I think we can stipulate that there is an environmental impact by reason of the existence of e-bikes. I know this because I personally, because of sciatica, I've rented some e-bikes now, and I know I can return to biking because of e-bikes. And I haven't biked in a couple of decades before renting these bikes. And I also know there's an advantage to me from class 2 than class 1 because it's going to help me do that first mile. I live 3 miles from the Bay Trail, and this with an e-bike, I can get to the Bay Trail and back without throwing a bike in the back of the car. So the class 1 is going to help me with that personally because of the sciatica. And I can also attest to the fact that I will be a number that gets up and deeper into the park because of an e-bike. Because certainly right now, I can't get up the Alhambra Creek Trail up to the old Briones Road on my own. Nowhere near. But I can't, and I'm never going to use mountain bike trails. So, I'm not that good a test case for that one. But we're going to have more people using these trails deeper into the parks. The sheer volume of new people will have some environmental impact, clearly. But the point is, it's not because we're messing with Ordinance 38. It's because of COVID. It's because of technology. It's because of changing recreational interests. All of these are factors that will bring higher volumes and have brought higher volumes. We are currently experiencing a huge increase. They had 100. I was told today they had 100,000 people last month at Lake Chabot. They didn't have that kind of volume before COVID. And it includes more hikers, pedestrians, runners, and bicyclists and e-bikes. So it's going to be part of that mix of increased volume that will have environmental impacts on parks as the economy has impacts on volumes. As there are all these external factors, and the most significant being, in this case, technology and COVID. And so our challenge is managing new volumes. It's been my impression for the last couple of years that the Park District has been endeavoring to manage volumes of people. And we've been trying to accelerate better access, more access, looking at opening new lands, opening new trails, all the land use plans that are incorporating the concept of new trails. Are to accommodate our new populations and such. So I don't think any of us are saying there aren't environmental impacts for more people using our parks. There is, it's the challenge of management that it entails and that you folks have to work on. And is then the question of monitoring and trying to mitigate these impacts in general. I sense that that's an ongoing endeavor and something that we're going to incorporate on a much accelerated rate in terms of Briones and the the pilot out at Briones, because we have to have in the forefront of everything we're doing there and elsewhere preservation of habitat, recapturing habitat. And to me, that's the best justification for what we're doing with the test project. Is the goal is to recapture habitat and preserve from rogue trail building existing habitat. And to do that, we're going to have to both monitor and we're going to have to increase enforcement at the same time we're providing some new access. So all of that's in the mix, and we're working on those factors, not just what our rule, how to change rules. And I wanted you to comment on what our ongoing monitoring will look like, and perhaps increased enforcement efforts for habitat.
I'll try and do my best on that. So, like I said earlier, there's a group of internal team here in the district of staff, mostly around Sean's group and Lisa's operations group and stewardship, is that we're doing a strategic planning around trails, specifically looking at addressing some of these issues. And I think out of that effort will come some recommendations around enforcement, around monitoring, data collection, like who's using our trails, when are they using our trails. I think we really have to step up our trail game as part of the response to this increased crowding. And of course, it's not unique to us. All the agencies are experiencing the very same thing. National parks are, state parks are, everybody's experiencing it. It is, I teach classes at Merritt College. And at one point the students asked me, hey, Jim, what are your top three issues you see in parks? And I said, well, first is climate change is something we have to pay attention to. That's going to change use patterns, how we manage resources. The number two thing I said was crowding. I said, how do we manage increasing numbers of people and protect these parks that we're charged with protecting? And I think you said many of the things that I would say about that is you've got to look at expanding opportunities, meaning expanding our trail system, spreading the use out, providing some unique trail opportunities. This conversation has about designated use, like specific trails. We can look at that too, and maybe put those in certain strategic places and spread that use out. Enforcement's going to be a part of it. Monitoring these bootleg trails and seeing if they're growing or shrinking, and then rehabbing them as best we can. Maintaining the quality of trails so that people are comfortable using our trails and make sure they're in a serviceable condition, what we call sustainable trail condition. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we're up to it. It's just going to take some time to adjust to that. But it's going to be a combination of expanding access, enforcement, and then good education is another part. One of the things that's really interesting about the Briones pilot project, especially the public meeting that we had, was the conversation with the mountain bike community. Some of those people didn't even think that the bootleg trails that are being created were a problem. And I had a long conversation with them, and I was pretty straight up with them at the meeting about that. That is destroying habitat. That is not okay. Even if you want us to expand that use, that is just not an appropriate thing to do. And some of them, so we have to educate people. And I think that's something that's going to come out of that Briones pilot project, is really getting the trail user community to understand is that they have to be a part of the solution. And you just can't do what you want to do. And we also have to then look at the demand side of that and try to look at expanding our system. And I know the board members have mentioned that on many occasions about getting some of these, some of our land bank properties open and getting some new trails opportunities out there. So it's a big challenge, but I think we're up to it. It's going to just take some time to get things moving.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Anyone else on the board? Hearing none, we have before us, and each of our committee members has in their packet 43 letters or emails concerning this issue, and 4 speakers have signed up to speak on the subject. I know I've reviewed all of the emails, and I thank everyone for participating this way. I think we should probably go to the speakers who have signed up. Monique, do you have that list?
Yes.
And if you didn't sign up and you're on the Zoom somewhere, please raise your hand. Or if there's anybody in this meeting that would like to speak, please just raise your hand and we'll get to you. But let's go by the list first, okay?
Sure. President Waspy, the 4 speakers that contacted us in advance were Joel Schrock, N. Vautier, Kevin Brown, and Bruce Bayard. I see that Joel Schrock Present.
Okay, go ahead, Joel.
Hi there. Thanks, you guys. I'm Joel Schrock, the advocacy lead for a group of Bay Area mountain bikers called Bambi. We're closing in on 12,000 members. I also provide advocacy support for the Bay Area Bike Project, whose mission is more kids on bikes. They've helped get hundreds of local kids on bikes that may not have been able to afford them otherwise. I'm here today to urge you to support the recommendation of your Deputy General Manager and his staff to allow Class 1 e-bikes the same access as traditional bikes within our parks. The Briones MTB pilot is a huge step forward for bike access in our park, but we need to make sure it's a huge step forward for everyone. Since the climb routes at Briones are so steep, if e-bikes are banned from riding the pilot zone, it'll have the unintended consequence of banning the people that use their e-bikes to get out and ride. Aging riders that need little help to get up the hills or to keep up with their stronger friends, people with chronic health issues or injuries, people with disabilities, and also our kids, since parents like me use an e-bike to pull their kids up the hill so the kids can focus on the fun part. If I took my 8-year-old out to Briones, he would be off his bike and walking and complaining within 5 minutes if I wasn't able to pull him up the steep sections. I'm fine with doing those climbs under my own power if it's just me, but when I hook up a 60-pound sack of potatoes off the back of my bike, those climbs are simply out of reach for the two of us without a little help from the e-bike. At the end of the day, the groups listed above aren't the types of riders that would be riding fast and recklessly. They're just trying to get out into nature, and a little help from the e-bike makes it easier to do so. I think the biggest obstacle we face is fear of the unknown. Many people don't realize how similar Class 1 e-bikes are to a traditional mountain bike. They may help you get up the hill, but they can't blast up the hill like a motorcycle, which I think most people fear. They certainly don't make you go down the hill any faster. In actuality, they go slower downhill so you can control the extra weight of the bike. As studies have shown, Class 1 e-bikes and traditional bikes are so similar in how they are ridden on a trail, many people don't even notice that some riders are on e-bikes. So let's not exclude the people that ride them from being able to enjoy our parks. Thank you so much for considering this proposal, and thank you very much for supporting the Briones pilot project. It's an amazing step for our parks.
Thank you. We'll move now to Eric Anderson. Eric, you there?
I am here. I'm so sorry. You think after 3 years of Zoom meetings, I could find the unmute button. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Eric Anderson, and I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to comment. I just wanted to encourage you to please recommend this revised e-bike policy for approval by the board of directors. A little bit about me. I'm a long-term, oh, sorry, my video is off. Apologies. There we go. Hey. I'm a long-term resident of Richmond. My family uses Wildcat Park almost every weekend. I'm a lifelong hiker, cyclist, and former equestrian. I grew up mucking stalls in the barn where my mom boarded her 2 horses when I was a kid, and in fact got kicked by a horse once, which I made sure to never happen again. I'm also been a mountain biker since 1992. Now that I'm in my 50s, some of the chronic health issues that I've had my whole life are really interfering with my ability to enjoy the parks the way that I used to. And I just can't get up those steep hills in Wildcat and other parks without taking a risk to my health. So for me, an e-bike is really a mobility device that allows me to continue to access parkland and continue to participate in mountain biking, which is a sport that I love. And also, I definitely consider myself an environmentalist, and an e-bike is something that allows me to roll out my front door and get up into Wildcat and do, and other parks in an environmentally friendly way that doesn't add another polluting car trip to our local parks. So for me, it's really about not even having to get in a car to go to our parks and being able to do so in a way that's, more carbon neutral. So for me, it's a real environmental issue. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment, and encourage you to please consider recommending this for approval by the board. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comments. Jim Hansen.
Thank you, board members. I just guess I want to touch on the kind of what's the presentation, what's presented, and what hasn't. A couple of things. I was just looking at a recent article, and incidentally, Jefferson County is about 600,000. The Bay Area knows about 3 million folks. So it's a different kind of situation. But I read an article in East Bay Times about the issue around e-bikes. And it was a recent one, and the person said, I love my e-bike. Could be a real hazard on these paths. I don't see any contradiction between encouraging e-bikes and restricting where they can and should be used. And I guess my comment is on the basically open aspect of this without looking at some of the things that I think several of you have mentioned about taking it a step at a time, including in the Briones project. When we were at the Briones meeting, we asked staff about e-bikes, and it was, well, we're not going to talk about that. Well, maybe this is the time to introduce e-bikes on a pilot project. We know that MidPen took 2 years to look at this. They looked at it very carefully, and they made a different decision. So what I'm going to ask is that that you consider taking a more moderate step, an in-between step, to do a pilot as part of the Briones pilot, to look at, and I want to address aging if I can real quickly. My experience is that, including when I was on hiking and horse-only day on Sunday at Briones, is that people using e-bikes are younger. I have never, in my own experience, seen anybody above 50 on an e-bike. I'm sure they're out there. I think that we need to address aging folks. And one of the things I think needs to be included in this is your policy from 2018 about people with disabilities being able to use e-bikes on trails. We already have that. I think that could be instituted within Briones. It gives us a chance for a larger public. Now, recognize that the PAC is a very studious group and they really good contact, but that's 1/1,000,000th of your park users. We've never done a poll on this. I don't think very many of the public, certainly, I didn't know until this afternoon that this meeting was going to happen. Even talked to some of our members. So I would encourage a moderate approach. I would say, do not please go ahead with a wide open approval, because trails are the most important, I think is one of the most important decisions since the park district was started. This affects everybody's experience in the parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Norman LaForce.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, Norman LaForce. I speak on behalf of the Sierra Club and SPRAWDEF. My first statement is, wow, nobody from stewardship, no analysis from the environmental people in your district was presented today. And yet there were statements made, oh, there's not going to be a big environmental impact. We don't need to worry about this. And yet nothing presented about the other half of the park district's mission with regard to a major restructuring of a park, of access to the parks. Astounding. Amazing lack of willingness to deal with this issue. And we know that e-bikes do have environmental impacts. That's known. And the selective data that was presented here today is unfortunate because there are other studies that show there are environmental impacts. And we know that there are environmental impacts from rogue trails by bicycle, mountain bike use. Nothing about that. If this is going to go forward, I mean, Sierra Club and SPRAWDEF are going to expect a programmatic EIR on e-bike access as a mandatory requirement before you allow this use. That is absolutely essential. Secondly, the notion that somehow, well, we have a lot of capacity, so we got to allow people more access. Yes, there's huge issues about capacity. The logic is the more people want to do it, then we do it. Well, you know, you could build a stairway to the top of Half Dome so that more people could have access to Half Dome. But I doubt anybody's going to propose that. there's just an utter lack of real analysis of what you're proposing here. In addition, I know I was not at the PAC meeting, the Park Advisory Committee meeting, but I have heard from people, it was not the jolly fest that's been presented here. There were a lot of issues, there was a lot of discussion, and the fact that it could not, as the Park Advisory Committee, come to a recommendation in favor says something about that, because the Park Advisory Committee usually supports whatever the Park District wants. And in fact, I heard from people who do not want to be made public, their basic response was, the fix is in. And I just can't risk saying much more than that. There's a huge issue here. You have not done the public outreach about e-bikes that you need to do. And this is classic for this park district. It's not doing it. This meeting, I only heard about it because I got the notice about the executive committee meeting. And that's not public notice for a major change in a recreational access and use to the park district that's being proposed. This executive committee can propose this and it'll go to the board, and it's just.
Thank you, Norman. Your 3 minutes are up.
And more issues than if you step back and say, we got a lot of things to look at. In particular, we need to look at the environmental impacts of what we're doing.
Thank you. Bruce Bayard.
Let's see, the host has stopped my video, but I guess my audio. Okay, start my video. I can't do it.
Welcome.
Yeah, there we go. Director Waspy, or President Waspy, Directors Coffey and Eccles. And my name is Bruce Beyer, as you know. I'm speaking for TRAC, the Trails for Richmond Action Committee. We support the staff's recommendation to allow Class 1 trails on the Bay Trail in Richmond, which is our focus. We also support the recommendation to not allow Class 2 or Class 3 vehicles. My email to you articulating that in some detail, but let me just address the Class 2 motorized bicycle issue. For perspective, the district operates about 12 miles of Bay Trail in Richmond. That's a third of the 36 miles Richmond has. Almost all of that is in natural areas where people are engaging in recreation, including passive recreation, bird watching, and stopping to enjoy the bay vistas, take photographs. It's not just a paved strip of asphalt with people hiking straight ahead at 2 or 3 miles an hour. And it isn't just bicycles going straight ahead. If you were to allow Class 2 vehicles, e-bikes, they are just motor vehicles to be driven. They do not require pedaling. And in that respect, they're very similar to the wide variety of electric boards and scooters attached to my email. If you were to allow Class 2 vehicle e-bikes, you're engaging on a very slippery slope. It'd be very hard to say no to motorized boards and scooters, including those you sit upon, stand upon, or whatever. And that does lead to capacity issues because the Bay Trail is not wide enough to allow more fast-moving, driven motor vehicles. It would have to be widened, allow space for people to separate the users. For example, the George Miller Trail is about two roads wide. It's very wide. You can accommodate a wide variety of users with space for people to get out of the way of fast-moving, driven motor vehicles. However, places like the Bay Trail between Central Avenue in Richmond and Marina Bay is not wide enough. There's not space to widen it to allow a safe place for motorists or pedestrians to be separated from fast-driven motor vehicles, sidewalks, if you will. So, and Class 3 vehicles, it's wise to address them, to prohibit them because they can go 28 miles per hour, almost twice the district's 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. And the data shows that motorized bikes do go faster than conventional bikes. So that's a quick summary of the details in TRAC's email sent to you. I'm glad to try to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Scott Bartlebaugh.
Hello, can you hear? Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today, board members and staff. You received my written email. And you've covered most of the items in there. Our ask from the membership of Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay is that you approve the Class 1 access in the staff recommendation. I think the PAC discussion was very good. I think the discussion here by the committee members was very thorough and raised a lot of good points. And I think the benefits far outweigh the downsides with e-bikes. So I think that's been covered thoroughly. I think there were some points today that I'd like to touch on a little bit. There were concerns with bootleg trails, or I think President Waspy called them bandit trails. I think that gets back to a lack of equitable access for mountain biking in the district. And I think that will largely improve when there is equitable access. The Brownies pilot is a great step to move towards that. But as you think about that potential impact here, think about where access is. And I think the discussion about capacity, the park district recognizes that it's had significant challenges adding trail mileage to the district. They formed the Trail User Working Group to try and get past some of the hurdles there. So it's recognized the challenges that are there. But still, pre-COVID, there were still big increases in public demand for trails. And until that's addressed, I think there will still be issues from all user groups going off the existing trails and creating additional paths. So it was good to hear from DGM O'Connor that they're looking at a strategic trail plan, which I suspect would address that. So keep that in mind, I think, in the thoughts about concerns with bootleg trails. Let's see. Along that line, adopting trails is an option. In Briones, it's a temporary adoption, and some people have concerns that would be rewarding scofflaws. But I see that as a way to take not a reward to scofflaws, but recognizing that there is this valid demand for legitimate recreation access. And those are already there. So that is one way to try and address that. And I don't think it's a reward to the scofflaws. Getting back all to that capacity. But my 3 minutes is up. I thank you for the time, and I thank you for your thorough discussion on this matter.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Matthew McGinnis.
For some reason, it's not letting me put my, there we can go, my video. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I really just wanted to register my support for the proposal to expand access for Class 1 e-bikes and Class 2 if you see fit as well. It seems like I've heard much more support than I expected, so that was a pleasant surprise. I'll pivot to the comments about the bootleg trails and just share one experience, and not even locally. Last summer, I traveled to Salt Lake City and did some mountain biking there. I am a mountain biker. I do primarily conventional bike, but I do have an e-bike also, which I probably use for maybe 15 or 20% of my biking. And to Mr. Hansen's comment, I'm 57 years old. So if you're looking for somebody over 50 on an e-mountain bike, I'm one of them, and I regularly bike with friends in their 50s and early 60s who use them. And so, but in Salt Lake City, I don't know how they've done it, but they have found a way to build some very mountain bike specific, challenging, fun trails that are, they're separate than the hiking trails, and it has the dual impact of keeping people from wanting to build bootleg trails because they're allowed to build and ride on fun, challenging trails. And it also prevents the trail user access conflict because the bikes have their own trails, the hikers have their own trails, and everybody's happy. They've somehow worked it out there. I don't know the details, but I would just encourage you to look to see how they've done it in Salt Lake City. And I'm talking about right in the main area in the hills, right above Salt Lake City there, where you could park your car, take your bike off, ride past a housing development and right into the trails. It's not a remote area at all. It's a highly populated area. And talking with my friends that live there, there's really no conflict there. They've worked it out. So might be a model to check out for you. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Kevin Brown.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Wow, great presentation by Jim. That was incredible. And all the comments by Director Coffey and just everyone in support of adopting the Class 1 e-bikes. I couldn't agree more. I also want to support Class 2 because my family, we love mountain biking. Briones happens to be my favorite place to ride I've ever been to, especially, well, now that I can actually legally ride fun trails, because us mountain bikers, we do not enjoy fire roads. So getting some access for us is awesome, and we really appreciate it. Now, for an e-bike, I'm 41, and I can ride an analog bike, but I like to ride nearly every day. If I ride an analog bike for 2 days in a row, and somewhere like Briones, without fail, my left knee will flare up, and then I won't be able to ride for about a week and a half. It prevents me from being able to ride in Briones. So having an e-bike allows me to go to my favorite place. Briones is just so close to my heart that's where I go 80% of the time. I recently convinced my dad to get an e-bike. That didn't take much convincing. He's 77, and he has a Class 2 e-bike. And he tried the Class 1 e-bike in Briones. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. He tried the Class 1 e-bike in Briones. He borrowed one of mine, and his hip arthritis on his right side and then his hip replacement on his left side prevents him from really being able to pedal at all. So he bought a Class 2 e-bike and brought it out and just had the time of his life and just loved it. So I would just really like to support both Class 1 and Class 2 so that more people can enjoy the trails. And just to quickly touch on what Scott had mentioned and the last speaker, if there's more access to trails that are already there that are fun and challenging, it will stop. Yeah, I promise you, if us bikers are given more, the builders will stop building more trails. It's not that they want to build, it's just out of lack of other places, of anywhere to go. So if more trails are opened, that is the best way to stop the bootleg trail building. It really is. Thank you so much all for listening to me and giving me an opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all the speakers and all the folks that wrote emails and letters to us on this subject. And thank you for the presentations. If there's nothing further for board members or any other Zoom commenters or people in the building that would like to comment on this, we do have the opportunity to recommend to the full board of directors at a future meeting to amend Ordinance 38 to allow the use of Class 1 e-bikes on all Park District trails that currently allow for conventional bike use, and to continue the use of Class 2 e-bikes on the 8 paved regional trails that currently allow e-bikes. And we will continue to monitor potential impacts and adapt management strategies as necessary. That's how the resolution's written. Do I have a motion to accept or approve?
Yeah, with more discussion. So I'll move.
Okay, right. Okay, we have a motion.
Yeah, after it's moved in second.
Yeah. And we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just wondered. I have to turn on the mic. I just wondered if Jim had any quick responses. We just heard a lot of thoughtful commentary from a variety of views, and just wondered if it triggered any thoughts on your part. Understood. I have one question, and that is the reference in the recommendation and the motion that we've
Sorry
just,
about
the motion that we've just made references 8 paved trails, the regional trails where we've already allowed for e-bike use. That raises in my mind the question of, and the uniqueness of the Bay Trail. Bruce brought up the Bay Trail, and then the Bay Trail, as opposed to our jurisdiction, is multi-jurisdictional, isn't it?
Mhm.
And so technically we can't make a rule for the Bay Trail. Is that correct? Or, but it's, I want to preface this by, I'm on the Bay Trail almost every day if I'm not somewhere else. Hiking trails is my daily outing along the Hercules, and e-bikes are again prevalent. But it's not ours to make these decisions on the Bay Trail.
I don't know if we have do we have an interjurisdictional committee for the Bay Trail other than the Bay Trail
Sean might.
Association, Sean? Mhm. So in the category of lessons learned, when we did open up the Iron Horse Trail, we have several jurisdictions, city jurisdictions that we run through, and we did go and present at those separate jurisdictions.
That's true.
In the vast majority of those, we had that authority to actually make those rules for use of the trail. The one exception was the city of Pleasanton. So we did go do a presentation to them, and their council approved that. So I'd have to do some more research on that, but I don't believe we may have to go to ABAG because it's part of the Bay Trail. We'd have to do some research on that. But we would first, if we had interjurisdictional issues, we would address those first before making a rule change for the Bay Trail.
Yeah, well, I'll take it up a little with Bruce, who's our Bay Trail expert as well. And it's important to me because I've actually had questions come to me from Hercules council members and some, back where I live is, what about the signs on the Bay Trail? And I've always thought it's a multi-jurisdictional approach and everyone's going to have to figure that one out.
Yeah, and the Bay Trail is used, a big impetus for us to allow the class 1 and class 2 on the regional trails was the active transportation angle on that.
Yeah.
And our regional trails play a huge role in active transportation in the East Bay. So that's something we should probably consider coming to the full board.
And looking at it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, just quickly on that point. So wouldn't that just automatically default to the state legislation so that they would be allowed if we didn't act otherwise? Both the 1 and 2, I assume, would be allowed.
That's a good point. That may be accurate, but we'd have to look into that.
So if we wanted to do something different, then we would need to engage with our colleagues at the other organizations. But otherwise, I think it would default under state law. But it's worth checking for sure.
Good point, though. That's a great point. Thank you.
All right. If there's no further comments, we have a motion and a second. Monique, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Taking roll, President Waspy,
Aye.
Director Eccles,
Aye.
Director Coffey.
Aye.
So moved.
Motion passes unanimously. As said before, we'll bring this up to the full board of directors in the future, and we welcome all your questioning and comments at that meeting. We'll now move to public comments that are not on the agenda today. Anyone have a public comment not on the agenda? Oh, Norman, go right ahead.
Well, technically, maybe it was on the agenda, but I would appreciate knowing when is this e-bike thing going to be presented to the board? I would hate to have this done on a 72-hour notice. I think the board needs to make this at least a 2-month notice to public ahead of time and provide public outreach about this. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
All right. I don't consider that unreasonable. Do we have a date when we want to bring this up?
We don't have the date yet, but we will be sure to notice everyone with sufficient amount of time.
Right. Thank you. Seeing no hands, no members of the public present, we'll move to committee comments. Committee members have comments?
Just to appreciate all the work that's been put into this and the immense progress that's happening in my mind on trail use after years and years and years of talking and a lot of people talking with absolutely no solutions whatsoever. We're actually talking about solutions, and I appreciate that, however controversial they may be, that we can move them forward and move them forward in a manner that engages the public. We've had tremendous public response. Just, to isolate one, the 260 people who came to the Wildcat Flow Trail Zoom session was a turnout that I haven't seen since the gun club controversy. And so, I want to appreciate the efforts that have gone into at every level having public input responses and what we've seen both in physical attendance and Zoom attendance and email attendance and input. It's really been tremendous. And I want to thank you all for your efforts as I'm gazing out toward the staff in the room. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Elizabeth, anything?
Yeah, well, likewise, I would like to thank everyone for all your work. And likewise, I really appreciate the public outreach. I do feel like we can go even a step further to make sure that we're reaching people who aren't necessarily part of the stakeholders who are already involved. And I also think that we can very easily make sure that notices are on our website, directly on our website under news or events or something obvious, so that if someone who isn't connected with one of those groups wants to engage in a public workshop or come to one of our meetings and speak on the issue, that they also have that opportunity. But that is so there's just, I think you're doing a great job, but I think we could do even better. So thank you. Thanks for all your work on this.
And I would echo Colin and Elizabeth's sentiments also. Thank you for the great work. It wasn't easy, but we did have lots of community input and lots of participation in this. So we'll move now to, or I guess one comment I would have was excellent employee appreciation event this morning. In spite of the weather, it was fantastic. And now we'll move to general manager, deputy general manager comments. Anything? Hearing none. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned. Thank you.